So if I was to ask you, where did it all start? What are the roots of this game?
And everyone is like, "Arey yaar, what's happening? Yeah, today it's kabaddi, tomorrow what? It'll be gilli danda, it'll be marbles. What's going on?" Today they're playing for salaries that are upwards of 2 crore rupees for 3 months of work.
Wow.
So suddenly there was this wake-up call that hang on, this is India's own sport, but we've just been beaten for the first time.
No, I'm telling you, let's do one kabaddi, India versus Pakistan, and it will hit the roof.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're so much better than them right now that it'll be a flat-out dominant victory for us. It is firstly on record, I think, the longest kabaddi game that's ever been played in history. The Pro Kabaddi League, the opening night alone in India had 40 million plus viewers on the opening night. Now that is the power of Bharat.
Welcome to a new episode of A Century of Stories India, presented by IDFC First Bank, recognized by Forbes as one of the world's best banks for 2025. I'm your host, Kunal Vijayakar, and today we explore a sport that began not in stadiums or under floodlights, but in open fields, courtyards, and village akhadas. Kabaddi was originally played barefoot, without fixed rules, and its traditions were passed down orally. The game was simple, intensely physical, and deeply popular in rural India. Over time, Kabaddi experienced a remarkable transformation. It adopted formal rules, established federations, gained credibility, and ultimately achieved international recognition. Now, how did a game so deeply rooted in rural India become a global sport watched by millions? To examine this journey, I'm joined by Suhail Chandhok, a former professional cricketer turned sports broadcaster, commentator, and today he's the co-founder of the Yuva Kabaddi series and the CEO of the Pro Kabaddi franchise U Mumba. And he's also a prominent observer of the evolution of Indian sports in recent decades. Suhail has witnessed Kabaddi's transformation from an informal competition to a structured, televised league, and from a regional pastime to a global sport. So this episode explores more than just the sport of Kabaddi. We examine how credibility is established, how organizational structure shapes public perception, and how well-designed institutions can preserve and nurture foundational roots. Join us as we trace Kabaddi's journey from its rural origins to global prominence. Suhail, welcome to the show.
Thank you, great to be here.
You know, I started with this long introduction, and that introduction itself takes me into the depth of how old and how sort of traditional the game of Kabaddi is. So if I was to ask you, where did it all start? What are the roots of this game, and how far back does it go?
Well, I guess it's hard to date it exactly back, right? I mean, you think back and a lot of people say it goes back about 4,000 years. There is evidence in our scriptures that Lord Krishna actually played Kabaddi. There's evidence that Gautama Buddha played Kabaddi recreationally as well. You know, and I think when you look back at certain things, it's also said that Lord Ram actually learned from Lord Krishna how to evade the opposition and enemy tactics by learning a bit of Kabaddi. So there's a lot of history about the game. And I think when you sort of go to the origins of it, you think of the name itself, Kabaddi. You know, I'm half Tamilian and half Punjabi, and my Tamilian side is the side I know better in some sense. And the name itself, Kabaddi, comes from Kaipidi. Kaipidi in Tamil means holding hands. You know, so the name itself is about holding hands. It's about an attachment to each other. And that chain tackle that we today speak of so fondly comes from the name itself, you know. So there's various origins to the sport. In Maharashtra, it's known as Hututu. In Andhra Pradesh, Chedugudu. In Bengal, it's Hadudu. And of course, we know it as Kabaddi today, the modern phenomenon that it is. But love that introduction. And I think you're right, you know, you dated back to rural India and villages, and it was raw, it was instinctive, it was wonderfully chaotic. And then today it's been modernized. And while, you go back in time and if you had a disagreement, you're arguing with the village uncle or your chacha or your mama or your dada. Today you're arguing with a referee with HD 4K cameras watching you, you know. So the game has advanced, it has moved on, and the world is talking about Kabaddi. So to me, Kabaddi is India's gift to the world.
No, I agree completely. And it's about time that we had a sort of Indian sport which could go out into the world
Yeah.
and, show itself. But I'm coming back to the sort of story of the origins. Would you say that then Kabaddi was like war games? Was it like in preparation for one going to battle as we did regularly 1,000 years ago, or just protecting yourself, or I don't know? Is it
Maybe
is
it was
martial
even
art of-
recreation. Yeah, exactly. It could be a mix of both. Again, very hard to pinpoint the origins of it. Unfortunately, we don't have it. As you said, a lot of it was passed down orally, and I've spoken to so many people, and several, unfortunately, whose ancestors have passed away and can't quite give us the real truth and the real nuggets. But I think it's a mix of both, right? I think recreationally, it's such a wonderful sport to keep you fit, to keep you active, to keep you agile, just given the various movements that the sport possesses. But also, I think to evade, it's 1 versus 7. It is a combat sport. At the end of the day, it is 1 raider versus 7 defenders. You're finding your way towards your safe zone, which is at midline, So it's got such power in what, at the very roots of it possesses.
So what started off, and I remember sort of growing up in Bombay as a child, there were always sort of upmarket sports and sports that were played in the village,
Yeah.
and without trying to sound like an elitist. Our schools played volleyball and cricket and that kind of stuff, but you would on Doordarshan see kabaddi matches happening. You would see in lanes,
Yes.
in the older areas like Dadar, Parel,
Yeah.
people playing kabaddi and hututu actually.
Hututu.
What and instead of saying kabaddi, 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 because there's a hututu would happen.
Yes.
So how do you think this game came into sort of prominence
Yeah.
outside local areas and gullies and that kind of stuff?
Firstly, I think you raise a very valid point there, right? We all speak of, even today, you're talking about when you grew up, everyone spoke of volleyball and certain more elite sports. Even today, everyone says, oh, football is on the rise. Football is the sport that every Indian watches. Manchester United, Barcelona, Real Madrid. But then you look at the numbers, and the numbers are quite stark. And I always am fond of going to data when you have to prove certain points, right? And it's a fun point to prove because you go back not so far. You go back to 2022, the Qatar FIFA World Cup was going on. The first day of the FIFA World Cup, I think, had 9 million viewers. The first week or the first 6 days of the FIFA World Cup had 31 million viewers in India. We're talking about, at the same time, the Pro Kabaddi League, the opening night alone in India had 40 million plus viewers on the opening night. Now, that is the power of Bharat.
It's not only the power of Bharat, it's how we are, in a way,
Perception.
Yeah, we don't know who would have thought?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right? We are in our bubbles. We're living in our bubbles. We I think, forget that the real power of India doesn't just lie in the metros. It goes out into tier 2, tier 3 India. There's a lot of real India that is existent there. And we just need to unlock the power of real India, right? We keep speaking about Naya Bharat and having sort of that ability to bring it out. And when you've got something as dynamic as a sport like this, why not? So, I go back to its roots, and you spoke about Parel. There's actually the first notion of it at the Olympic Games was an exhibition that was played. It wasn't, unfortunately, an official exhibition, but in 1936 at the Berlin Olympics, a gentleman by the name of Dattaram Lad, if I'm not wrong, from Parel. And there's 2 versions to this. One version says there was a contingent of 35 members that went across to Berlin, played an exhibition game. Everyone loved it so much that they asked for a second game to be played. 40 minutes, 2 halves of 25-minute break and a half. And the fact is that everyone in Germany loved it. Adolf Hitler, in fact, apparently appreciated the sport. So that's one version. The other version is that this gentleman on his own solely went to Berlin, but there was an exhibition of the sport. So again, very hard to trace it back because unfortunately, Mr. Dattaram Land is no longer
And
alive.
nobody's written it down.
And no one has actually written it down. And that is the chaos of Kabaddi that you also love. Score lines were not written down for a long time, And so I think, as beautiful as a sport is, it is, like I said at the start, wonderfully chaotic.
Yeah, and it's amazing. If this is true, if Dattaram Lad did really go to the Berlin Olympics in the 1930s, that means that would be probably the beginning of trying to make a totally indigenous sport international.
Correct. And I think that's the key, right? You need some recognition to come through. And that's the sort of first sign that here's an Indian sport that we think deserves being taken to the world.
Yeah.
And then you go forward about 15 years. I think 1950-51 was when the AIKF originally was formed, and that was the All India Kabaddi Federation.
Okay.
So that was formed initially.
So stop.
Yeah.
So what were the forces behind saying, okay, now there is this sport that we all love at a certain level,
Yeah.
tier 2, tier 3, even in the city local level. Let's now try and make this international. You're already fighting with large sports like cricket.
Correct.
I think at that time even football wasn't. Football was also local clubs
Yeah.
and Calcutta, Goa kind of thing. What sort of do you have any story as to how it all?
So I think the story here goes back from my knowledge and my conversations is that inherently at that time, cricket was still a British sport.
Okay.
Right? It wasn't looked at as our own sport. Here's Kabaddi, which is indigenously an Indian sport, right? So this is an opportunity to showcase India to the world. It was actually a part of a few other indigenous sports that were taken to the Berlin Olympics from India as well. So it was part of that.
Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but sort of which other indigenous sports did they try to popularize?
So I'll have to look back at my notes, but I think Malakhambh was the other one.
Malkhamb.
Malkhamb. See, I don't
Yes.
even know how to pronounce it, unfortunately, right? So Malkhamb.
Yeah.
Malkhamb was the other sport that was showcased apparently. And again, this is all hearsay. This is all passed down by someone's dada or tata, and it's been passed down the generations. And today we're sitting here talking about it. But I'm glad we are, because I think I wish, and all of us wish, this was, handed down with a lot of informative knowledge, and that we could look back and say, this was the truth. Unfortunately, we have several versions of the truth, as we often do. But that, I think, was the initial thought process, right? Here's an Indian sport. Why are we not showcasing India? It's a time where independence was creeping in after as well, right? And so the emergence of an association in 1950-51 was, I think, again, another step in that direction to say, you know what? India is now independent. India now deserves its own sports to be formalized, to have institutions about it. So I think that's sort of the first sort of murmurs of how do we professionalize and institutionalize this sport.
So how did we professionalize? Now, nothing was ever written down. Rules were
Yeah.
random. I mean, I'm sure people followed some sort of rules and all. But I'm also sure that since they were not written down, there'd be arguments on the
course.
field. People would be beating each other up, saying, "Nay, I was right, I was wrong." So how did the federation,
Yes.
did it sort of sit down and say, okay, now let's make rules, let's draw straight lines, create teams and...
Exactly. So 1950-51 was when the AIKF, the All India Kabaddi Federation, initially came to existence. When you look to 2026, this year, we're actually into the 72nd Senior National Championship. So you look back, and therefore the first national championship was way back in 51, 52, I think, by my records. We missed, I think, a year or two in between. So even though the AIKF then became the AKFI, which today is the Amateur Kabaddi Federation of India, which is today what is in existence, let's just think of it as a change of name in 1972, right, or 1971. So that's where the initial institutionalization of the sport happened. 50-51, then you cut to 70-72 is when, it became the AKFI from the AIKF. And the first real emergence of India on the international map was in the mid-80s, 84-85. The SAF Games was when India had its first ever team, national team, head across and play Kabaddi representing India.
Okay, so now this is for a complete rank amateur. I'm going to ask you this question. So we've created a national Indian Kabaddi team.
Yeah.
We've got to go abroad and fight somebody or play against
Yes.
somebody. How did those countries, whichever those countries may be, figure out that let's embrace this Indian sport, learn it, and then compete in it?
So interesting question, because as much as we speak about Kabaddi being in our scriptures, and we talked about it going back to Lord Krishna and Lord Rama and Gautama Buddha, there is also evidence that in Iran, Kabaddi was part of their folklore. It doesn't date back 4,000 years, perhaps. It maybe goes back 1,000 years. But Iran, therefore, is still one of the powerhouses of the sport. Kabaddi is actually Bangladesh's national sport. Would you believe it? So, there is a lot of Kabaddi that is existent around Central Asia and Asia, around India. Pakistan, of course, another country that played a lot of Kabaddi, and this India-Pakistan rivalry and Kabaddi went back to the Asian Games as well. Iran has now emerged as a powerhouse of the sport. Korea has now emerged as a powerhouse of the sport. But dating back, I think it was these few neighboring nations that, really played it around us as well.
Yeah. So I can understand Pakistan and Bangladesh playing it.
Yeah.
But to have historically Iran enjoying the game I'm sure it's the trade routes that we had with those parts of the world.
Yeah,
which-
possibly. And I think also there's a wrestling culture in Iran, right?
Okay.
Iran produces some of the best wrestlers in the world till date. And if you look at actually even the kabaddi players that turn up in 2025 and 2026, you'll see that technique is so different to the Indian kabaddi players, right? There's a technique that's been taught and passed down in India, whereas in Iran, you can see the tackles are wrestling oriented. There is brute force, there's almost like a grapple hold, and it's almost impossible to get out of the clutches of an Iranian defender. The top defenders in the sport at the moment and the most highest paid defenders in the sport are actually Iranian.
From Iran. Okay.
And so you look at the sport and the development of the sport itself is different. And so you think it's not just about an Indian who's landed up in Iran and taught the sport, because then it would be essentially the same.
It followed the Indian way.
So you can sense that the sport has actually come in within that country. And that to me is beautiful, because you're seeing various elements of the sport differ in each area.
And those differences that are there in the sport, like you said, the tackling and the technique in Iran is different. Is it all still within the rules of what are internationally accepted now?
It is. And I think that's the amazing part, right? We're seeing a Korean who will have very different skill sets. You'll see the Iranians who come in with a very different mindset and skill set. You'll see the Indians who have a very different skill set. Today, from being a dominant force at the Asian Games and winning gold after gold after gold, suddenly now there's a challenge. In 2018, for the first time, Iran beat India at the Asian Games. In 2022-23, there was again an almost loss for India at the Asian Games. Our women and men lost in 2018. So suddenly there was this wake-up call that, hang on, this is India's own sport, but we've just been beaten for the first time.
Yeah, we can't rest on our laurels saying, "Humne create kiya, humne create kiya, khelna bhi chahiye."
Correct. So I think, and I think that's always a good sign. When someone else is beating you at your own sport or your own thing, it's a sign that has gone global. It is a sign that there's progress. And therefore, it's a sign that we could potentially and hopefully see this become an Olympic sport in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kabaddi's future was shaped not just by popularity, but by the introduction of structure, reliable rules, and trusted institutions. Progress accumulated steadily over time, driven by discipline and consistency rather than quick wins. This concept of steady progress is mirrored in our partner IDFC First Bank's monthly interest credit feature for savings accounts. Rather than waiting months for returns, interest is credited monthly, enabling growth to occur regularly and cumulatively, quietly building momentum over time. Was it difficult for the association, All India Kabaddi Federation, to make Kabaddi as a recognized sport? Did the world, or at least the neighboring world, accept it easily? How much effort went in trying to internationalize and make it into a recognized? Because first of all, we always talk of India as we follow one sport.
Yeah.
There's one sport,
Yeah.
So then you're not only adding a new in the sense, I'm sure, as you said, the inner parts of India and beyond the cities, everybody knew about the sport. But was it difficult to actually get them recognized?
I don't think the recognition was the issue. I think it's the popularity and where it went, right? Because, again, let's remember that cricket had its time in the sun with the 83 World Cup. Until then, okay, cricket was played by everyone and we loved the sport, but it didn't have this incredible moment where suddenly everyone spoke about the sport. And the adoption today, 1983, 2007, 2011, you can pick the moments that have transformed the sport, right? And I think similarly, you can pick these moments back in time that you could trace back and you think these are the moments where Kabaddi sort of picked its mark in the sun, right? 1936, that little showcase, the formation of the association, then becoming the AKFI. There were certain gentlemen that came together that played a part and then the sort of push forward as well. 1984-85, like I said, SAF Games, that was the first real push towards it. 1989, I think Sukhwinder Singh was the first recognized Indian captain of Kabaddi, right, in 1989. Then you go to 1990, and that was the first ever Asian Games where Kabaddi was part of the Asian Games officially, and it was only the men's team. So men's team, 1990, first ever Asian Games, India goes out, wins gold. And at that time, there was not even a final. It was a round-robin format. Everyone played 5 matches. And, at the end of the tournament, the team that was top of the table.
Scores. Yeah.
Took the title, and India was top of the table. 2010, I think, was when women's kabaddi featured for the first time at the Asian Games. And then, of course, 2014, July 26th, I remember the date, I think, as well, is when Pro Kabaddi's emergence came. And that, to me, was India's IPL moment for kabaddi, right? And I remember being there, actually, the day. It's so funny. I say this today, and I've got goosebumps saying it, because I remember the day before the 26th. So the 25th, we get to the NSCI, the dome here in Worli.
Yes.
And the lights came on the mat for the first time. And I had this goosebump-inducing moment which said, I think we're onto something special, And I remember at the time, I was at Star Sports as a commentator, and everyone was like, "Arey yaar, what's happening? Yaar, today it's kabaddi, tomorrow what? It'll be gilli danda, it'll be marbles, what's going on?" And, there was an air of like, what the hell is going on? What are you guys doing?
What are you guys doing? Yeah.
And the day the opening night came and went, you had Amir Khan and Ronnie Screwvala and Abhishek Bachchan and Amitabh Bachchan and Sachin Tendulkar and everyone there. But to me, the key was, unlike other sports that hinge on heroism, the sport itself won. It didn't lean on people that we knew to be
one hit a century.
Exactly. Or be household names, and therefore we're turning up at a stadium to watch a Sania Mirza or a Saina Nehwal or a PV Sindhu or a Sachin Tendulkar or an MS Dhoni. We turned up to watch the sport of kabaddi. And to me, that was the win. You didn't have iconic names initially. It was the sport. It was India's own sport. It is India's own emotion. And you tugged at those heartstrings of every Indian, because we all inherently have played the sport at some point, have appreciated the sport at some point, and thought, this is our sport. We've gone from the mud to the mat, and look at what we've come up with.
And deep down, we are desi,
Eventually, exactly.
Correct, no? So you talked about 2018 as the sort of big moment for Indian kabaddi. But subsequently, 22, 23, it sort of became a little dodgy. It's possible that we could have sort of fumbled over there.
Yeah, exactly. Look, 2018 was that awakening for Indian kabaddi, right? Iran beating India for the first time. Suddenly you're like, what just happened? We've lost our goal for the first time. And 22, 23, I remember being in that commentary box, and it is firstly on record, I think, the longest kabaddi game that's ever been played in history, because the match lasted in totality, I think, about 3 hours, which is normally a 40-minute game. And hilariously, I was in the commentary box, and there was a T20 game going on at the same time at the Asian Games. And Akash Chopra and a couple of others came into the commentary box and said, "Suhail, what's going on, yeah? I mean, the kabaddi game is still going. Kya chal raha hai, yaar?" And I said, hang on. So to break it down to you, India were trailing Iran. It was a game that was so high on intensity. Iran had an unbelievable side. India had an unbelievable side. And there's a small rule that says when a player enters the lobby without a touch on a defender, that is, a raider enters the lobby, which is the tram lines on the side, without a touch on the defender, if anyone follows him into the lobby, they are also deemed out. Now, the critical element was, by then, Pro Kabaddi had changed that rule. Because actually the rule is a bit archaic. If a guy just goes into the out of bounds region, he should just be out, and it should be like a cricket dead ball. The raid should end. So Pro Kabaddi had changed the rule. The International Kabaddi Federation, for the Asian Games rule book, had not changed the rule.
Okay.
So India and the captain and the coach knew that the rule had not been changed. But Iran obviously assumed that the rule had been changed, because most people were following the rules of Pro Kabaddi, because that was sort of the pathway set up.
More popular, yeah.
Right. So obviously at that time, the Indian raiders stepped into the lobby, gone out, and by the modern rules, he's deemed out, and Iran gets the point. And that raider is now on the bench. However, that then was gone under protest. This protest lasted 2 hours. Players sat down. Indian players were arguing. Both federations from the sidelines were arguing. The coaches got involved. The Iran coach sat there stoically, credit to him. And, it was chaos. It was absolute chaos. At one point, the points were awarded to Iran. And so then India erupted. At one point, then the decision was reversed. Then the decision was reversed back. At that point, I'm still on commentary. So we've done about 2 hours of commentary.
So you're still live?
Live. I'm live watching this unfold, and I'm messaging people from the federation saying, guys, give us which rule you're going by. And here I am sitting there, and we've got, and I did my best as a broadcaster and an informed commentator to give people both sides. I said, here's the modern rule. Here's the rule that we think is unfolding. But then when the decision is given in favor of Iran, I'm saying, well, guys, here we go. The rule is actually the Pro Kabaddi rule. And that's why the points have been awarded. And I remember getting so many galis on Twitter. I cannot.
You will be trolled.
Of course, I got hammered because obviously you're saying, hey, Suhail is not an Indian, he's supporting Iran. And I'm going, no. I am just explaining what is happening in front of our eyes. And imagine we're on commentary for 2 hours watching people squatting, just protesting. But at the end, as we always say in advertising, any PR is good PR.
Okay.
And what it did was it went viral on Twitter. And I don't mind whether it was, I got a lot of appreciation also from a lot of people because I took a very central by the middle.
Unbiased
look,
yeah,
right?
unbiased.
Everyone wanted me to take a very biased Indian outlook. But to me, I always pride myself on being someone that says things the way they are, and it needed to be said, right? So there was two sides to this. But I think that moment was also actually a very pivotal moment because it brought Kabaddi into the Twitterverse properly, right? And I think it went absolutely berserk and viral. Everyone was talking about why this Kabaddi game took 3 hours. India almost lost and then came out victorious. But again, under grey circumstances. So,
But how did it get resolved finally?
Finally, when the rule book came out, multiple people came out with the official rule book of the Asian Games. And in that rule book, I wonder whether they just forgot to change the rule.
Yeah.
Because to be fair, the
they
new
probably
rule was
did.
the new rule.
Probably
But they didn't change the rule book.
It wasn't there. So it
And
was fine.
India saw it, right? And so India played by the book. And that was that.
No, I'm telling you, let's do one Kabaddi, India versus Pakistan, and it will hit the roof.
Yeah, it will. Unfortunately, we're so much better than them right now that will be a flat-out dominant victory for us.
Even better. Even better.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. What a story this is. But people like you have had a great role, honestly, and don't
Thank
get
you.
humble on me on this
Thank
one. Because as a commentator, as you talk, you're selling the sport.
Yeah.
As you talk, you're creating excitement. As you speak, you're bringing alive this game. So a huge contribution from
Thank
people
you.
like you. You know, I know federation and all
Yeah.
is all great, but just I can see that excitement in your eyes, and that is what is going to make Kabaddi what it is.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
often say, growing up in a sports family where motorsport was, around me and sport was second nature to me. I think when I turned to cricket and professionalized my career as a cricketer, I always say cricket was my first love, but I think Kabaddi has become life, because in so many ways, I think I gave a lot to the sport initially and I really wanted to get in amongst it as a young commentator, young presenter. But then what it's given back to me has been incredible. Today I run my own startup, Elevate India Sports, and we founded the Yuva Kabaddi series, which is the pathway to Pro Kabaddi. I've had the privilege of being on the commentary side of Pro Kabaddi. I met my wife because of Kabaddi as well. And today I'm CEO of one of the legacy Pro Kabaddi franchises. And to see the sports evolution, you're right. And I don't take it lightly because I think it was our responsibility. And as someone who played sport professionally, I think there's a duty to do things well.
Correct.
Not just do them, but do them well. And when you saw this moment in the sun for Kabaddi and you hear murmurs of, "Arey, what's next, Gilli Danda?" You're now even more enthusiastic.
Karke dikhaunga.
And you see what the players have gone through. In the past, players played for pride, players played for a government job, and players played for the pride of that village, for the pride of their club, for the pride of their academy. Today, they're playing for salaries that are upwards of 2 crore rupees for 3 months of work.
Wow.
And that tells you the progress of this sport. That tells you how this sport has changed lives. And I'll give you a small little story, right? We, at the Yuva Kabaddi series, had teams from 26 different states, junior players, right? So these are all players who are just emerging as semi-professionals. They've never been really earning money to play the sport. There was a young man who maybe, let's say, he's earning 30 or 40,000 rupees from playing every odd tournament here and there through the year, I'm saying, right? 40, 50,000 rupees a year maybe from Kabaddi. He now is part of the Uttarakhand junior team. We have a name for each of these clubs. And so he's playing for one of the teams there. That team wasn't necessarily the best, but we recognize that he was fantastic, right? So there's a rule where 2 outstation players can play for one of the teams. We moved him to one of the Pondicherry sides. He went on to play the final. They lost the final. But he was recognized. And suddenly now, from being a Yuva Kabaddi star, he got picked up in the Pro Kabaddi auction. Close to 50 lakh rupees spent on him in the auction as a nobody. He goes back to his village, and there's a 2.5 kilometer long procession to welcome him back to his village. Wow. That village now suddenly is not about drugs, alcoholism, and doing exactly what your ancestors did. It was about how do I play Kabaddi and become a professional and live a better life. So I think there is socio-economic changes that we don't often associate with a sport. And I think that's why, to me, this is a very special journey because you're seeing tangible changes, not just in sports people's lives, but you're seeing it in communities, you're seeing it in socioeconomic cultures, you're seeing aspirational value change. Earlier, people used to be embarrassed to say they're a kabaddi player. Today, people are proud to go back and say, I'm a kabaddi player. Back then in 2014, teams went for 1.5 crores. Guess what valuations are today? 150 to 180 crores for a team.
What are you saying?
We've had offers at upwards of 150 crores for U Mumba, right? And of course, we're not selling. But such is a valuation. Everyone speaks of IPL teams going for 7,500 crores and teams like RCB and RR under sale at the moment at 1.5 to 1.8 billion, etc., etc. But look at the value.
Not bad at all.
You're talking about 1.5 CR to 150, 180 CR, right? And I think that's the unlocking of true value, right? And I think the emergence of Pro Kabaddi from 2014, the top player in 2014 sold for 12 lakh rupees, Rakesh Kumar. Today, it's close to 2.5 crores. And you're talking about 10 years, 11 years, right? 11 years, you're seeing incredible change.
Valuation gone up 100 times.
Exactly.
Which brings me to this very important point. Financial fraud is evolving rapidly, and staying protected today depends largely on awareness. IDFC First's Academy is a free digital platform designed to help people better understand financial safety and everyday banking risks. It offers flexible, easy to follow learning modules that cover topics such as identifying common fraud schemes, understanding how they work, and taking practical steps to protect yourself and your finances. The content is interactive, accessible at your own pace, and built to translate information into real-world action. To learn more and access these resources at no cost, visit idfcfirstacademy.com. When did you first fall in love with the sport?
So it's funny, right? Because at some stage in school, we were all playing it or made to play it at times, right? We grumbled about it, but we played kabaddi, right? Again, being city slickers. But I think I truly fell in love with the sport on that T-1 day to Pro Kabaddi, right? I had understood it just before then. I put my hand up as a commentator because I said, here's my in to a commentary box. I, of course, being a former cricketer, wanted to be a cricket commentator, but, the opportunities are slim. So, hey, no one else wants to do this. I will be a kabaddi commentator, So that moment where I think I saw the lights come on for the first time, that first night, that day did something for me, and I truly believe that we were onto something very special. There's a reason now, I guess, I put all of my time and energy and money behind this sport as a co-founder as well. And like I said, if you've met your wife somewhere and you get to spend the rest of your life around someone that you've met because of a sport, you can't help but say that this sport is very very dear to you. So kabaddi in so many various ways has been so special. But I think it was those
moment.
first couple of nights.
That moment.
Yeah.
What you said makes so much sense. And my question immediately after that is going to be the success, if I may call it, of any sport is unfortunately two things. One is how many people are really engaged with the sport.
Yes.
And two is what are the sponsorships coming to the sport? Are people putting money behind? When you say somebody can earn 2 crores a year, that means definitely there is some sort of, when advertisers put money behind, that they're doing it because people are watching. So how has that worked out?
Well, this company right here is a sponsor of Kabaddi.
Okay,
there's your answer, right?
There
So
you
I think, we are where we are because you're right. You have to have commercialization happen. And I always say to brands when we go into a marketing pitch, with Kabaddi, you're getting bang for buck because let's say there's about 700 plus million viewers for an IPL season. There's close to 300 and often 300 million plus viewers for a Pro Kabaddi season. But you're paying 1/10 of what you're paying in IPL for 1/3 the viewership. So I always go to a brand and say, you know what, if you can't afford the IPL, which many people can't as a brand.
Most people can't. And if they can,
they can,
get very little.
Exactly, right? You're getting minute deliverables from a team. Exactly. And whatever you're getting is, you're asking for it a lot, you're begging, borrowing, and you're getting a player for 2 minutes and whatever, right? Here you've got access. Here you've got people that want to actually help the brand grow with you. And here for me, it's like I said, 1/3 the price point, or rather 1/3 the viewership at 1/10 the price point. And so when you've got 250, 300 million people watching India's own sport, when the canvas is more blank and you can paint that canvas, I think there's There's a future that you hold in your own hands, right? Whether it's brands that are associating with the sport today, whether it's us as entrepreneurs and commentators or broadcasters that are in the sport, there's a responsibility to grow Indian sport, and I think this is part of that journey.
So where does the responsibility lie? Does it lie with government? Does it lie with local clubs? Does it lie with the pro kabaddi leagues? Whose responsibility is it to finally bring the sport bang up there, you know?
Great question. I think it lies partly with everyone. Now, when you look at the caliber of people that are stakeholders in the Pro Kabaddi League, and I always talk about leagues needing the right stakeholders. You look at the quality. You've got the Kotak family. You've got Ronnie Screwvala. You've got an Abhishek Bachchan. You've got the Adanis. You've got a JSW group. You've got a Capri Global in there as well. There's the heavyweights of Indian sport in many ways. It almost mirrors what you see in the IPL, the quality of ownership that you have, right? So I think there's a large responsibility that lies with us as Pro Kabaddi franchise owners and stakeholders. A lot of the responsibility, of course, lies with the league itself, the Pro Kabaddi League. How do you protect player rights? Now, suddenly they're seeing money come into their lives for the first time. One of the things we did at the Yuva Kabaddi series was run financial literacy courses. We had media training.
Very important.
I mean, look, there's always going to be a temptation otherwise for a player to throw a match, right? If someone comes and offers you 2 lakh rupees and you're earning not much and you say, you know what, ye match na, usko de do. And look, these are realities. I'm not shy to speak about it because I think we need to speak about things that need changing. And this has happened in cricket, this has happened in football, this happens in tennis today at the global stage, right? So how do you protect the rights of players? How do you create an ecosystem that is structured and formalized? You think of cricket, for example, right? A player plays the IPL. As soon as they're done with the IPL, they go out and play India versus Australia, or they play an Asia Cup, or they play Ranji Trophy, or they play the Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy. In Kabaddi, where is that pathway? Right? So one of the thoughts behind creating what we did was actually to say, beyond the Pro Kabaddi League of those 2.5 months, suddenly there'll be a guy who says, इस महीने में महाराष्ट्र में 2 लाख का टूर्नामेंट चल रहा है, हरियाणा में 50 लाख का टूर्नामेंट है. But it was very ad hoc. It was very disorganized. So I think the structure still needs to come in. You have a senior nationals, you have a junior nationals, a sub-junior nationals. But there's still, I think, a lot of room in between for players to be seen. And you need, as you know, you need to be in the eye of fans and be exposed to fans for them to appreciate you the year round. And for brands, right? If you have Kabaddi in the view of people, it reminds you that there's this sport that's existing and not just for 2 months of the year.
But I'm going to come back to, say, cricket. Everyone comes back to cricket.
Of course.
There's the traditional form of cricket, which is your test series, test matches, which is slowly become into 5 over, 10 over. I don't know what it's going to turn into. And there are people who are traditionalists who decry what has happened to the game, and there are people who are progressive who are saying, no, this is how the game should go. Do you think that the traditionalists, the way sons of the soil, people who sweated mud, literally kabaddi, will embrace what is happening, or will there be cynics? Or they say, "Arey, hamara kya tradition tha? Aapne isko kya kapde pehna de, colorful unko." Or
you're right. You're seeing a mix of both, right? I speak to some of the past players and they've embraced it. They know that they're thankful for the fact that at least Kabaddi today is getting its time in the sun. But there are the cynics who said, ye Kabaddi jo hai na, this is nothing compared to the quality of Kabaddi.
Kabaddi.
And the players back then were so much better. They were purer. And I agree. They were purer. They played for the love of the game. They played for pride. They didn't play for money. And so they were more sincere. You could see that there was a professionalism about it in some sense of what you're playing for. However, I think there's a recognition that the sport needed a shake-up. The sport needed a revolution. And I think what I love about the modern methodology to Kabaddi is the fact that you've not actually changed the core of the sport. You still have the chant of Kabaddi, 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 right? However, now there's a 30-second rate clock. You've just brought certain elements to make it more TV friendly. You've got a 30-second rate clock. You've got a mat, because suddenly now if it rains and you're outside in the mud, at least TVs can continue. So you've got stadiums that can be filled. You've got graphics that are brought in NBA style. You've got player entrances. They're made to look slick. We had at U Mumba players on the cover of GQ India. Who would have thought a Kabaddi player on the cover of a GQ magazine? So there is a modernization, but at the very root and the core of the sport, it is still essentially the same sport. It is still 1 versus 7. It is still kai pidi, holding hands. It is still a game where the breath work of a kabaddi player is tested. It is still a sport where the athleticism of the players are tested. And so you've not taken away from the essence of the sport. It's still 40 minutes, but there's more action, there's more carnage, there's more entertainment. And so I think even for the purists, while they grumbled, today there's an acceptance because look at what it's done for the players' lives, for their families' lives.
And for the sport
and
itself.
for the sport itself. Exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
And finally, coming to the people, okay? If cricket still ranks number 1, what ranks number 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Well, I don't say this sitting here wearing the Pro Kabaddi CEO hat or a co-founder hat, but genuinely, Kabaddi is well and truly number 2.
Truly number 2.
Truly number 2.
Not tennis, not
I say
football.
this on data. I say this on as a broadcaster. I say this having worked on the Olympics, Kabaddi, badminton, hockey, the ISL, and every other league that is foreseeable in India. Kabaddi is firmly India's second biggest sport in terms of viewership, in terms of the sheer quality of players, in terms of the stakeholder value, in terms of commercial value. There's the IPL, there's the PKL, and it's full stop.
There you go. Now, the last question left is that do you think I'll be able to play Kabaddi ever?
Why not? So here is a great little nugget for you, Kunal. Every player actually on the court has a very distinctive role, and the body types are very different as well. Cover defenders are shorter, stockier, have a wider base.
Like me. Huh.
And, we can still enjoy your food reviews as well. You can stand there, have a great base, and your center of gravity is so low that it is the perfect way to be a cover defender. So you could emerge as a cover defender. Why not?
What the hell? And with his support, I can do anything.
Absolutely.
Sohail, thank you so much, yaar. This is like, it was very important, this conversation, because we need to figure out what is us, what is purely Indian, I'm not saying cricket isn't. Cricket, we've already made it completely Indian, okay? Yeah. But I hear that Kabaddi as a game that is watched, supported is number 2. Yeah. It just makes me really proud.
Yeah, I think the key to me is that we are not letting go of the past. We are taking a sport that is inherently ours. We have modernized it, and we are saying, hey guys, everyone in the sporting world, this is India's gift to the world. And I think if we can think of Kabaddi like that and be proud of the fact that this is our own sport, come back it. If you're a corporate, come back it. If you're a fan, come watch it. If you think football is the only sport you're going to watch outside of cricket, turn up at a stadium and understand why everyone's so crazy about this sport. And then you'll fall in love with it.
And I think we could put it on record, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably the only sport which can actually be thought of as 4,000 years old.
I would
imagine. Is there any
so.
other sport? Tell us, write to us and tell us if there's any sport that you think is 4,000 years old. Well, thank you, Suhail. Great to chat with you. Great having this conversation.
No, pleasure all mine. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Well, this was Century of Stories India, brought to you by IDFC First Bank. See you next time. Now, IDFC First Bank brings you a safe banking tip. Protect yourself and your devices from malware that can lock you out of your data or compromise your device's security and give someone unauthorized access. Be cautious of emails with unexpected attachments, unfamiliar links, or offers that seem too good to be true. If something looks doubtful, don't click. Staying alert is one of the simplest ways of protecting your data and your finances. To report fraud, call 1930 or visit www.cybercrime.gov.in.